Nobody ever warned you about this hidden truth of lemon trees, and once you understand it, you may never look at gardening the same way again, because the more care you pour into your lemon tree, the worse your results can actually become. More water, more fertilizer, more attention, and somehow fewer lemons, and that is not bad luck or coincidence. It is a deeply consistent pattern hidden in plant biology that most people never notice, and today you are going to uncover what experienced. Growers take years to learn, something that is never printed on fertilizer bags or gardening manuals, because if this was widely understood, a lot of products would become unnecessary. And here is the core reality: your lemon tree is not failing because it is weak. It is failing to fruit because it has no reason to fruit. A tree that receives perfect watering, steady nutrients, and constant care reads its environment as completely safe, predictable, and stable. And when a plant feels that safe, it does not rush into reproduction. Instead, it grows leaves, builds branches, expands roots, and focuses on survival stability rather than fruit production. So season after season you may see a beautiful green tree but no lemons, and the strange truth is your care might actually be reinforcing the problem. Because fruiting in plants is not comfort, it is urgency. Reproduction in nature is not a luxury process, it is a survival response, and a plant will only invest the massive energy required to produce flowers and fruit when it senses that conditions might not stay perfect forever. Because flowering is expensive for a tree, it requires creating blossoms, attracting pollinators, developing fruit, and sustaining that fruit through full maturity, which drains enormous biological energy. So a plant only commits to that process when something in its environment signals change, pressure, or uncertainty. But when everything stays consistently ideal, the plant chooses the safest strategy, which is simply to keep growing more leaves and stronger roots. And that is why your well-cared for lemon tree often refuses to produce fruit, while even neglected trees sometimes produce heavily. Because in nature, stress is not always harmful. Sometimes it is the trigger for survival reproduction. And this brings us to a technique that experienced growers use quietly and effectively, known as the water stress method. And the surprising part is it requires no products, no fertilizers, no chemicals, and no expensive tools, only controlled timing and understanding of how the plant communicates. Because water is not just hydration for a plant, it is information, it is communication between environment and biology, and the moisture level in soil constantly tells the plant whether conditions are stable or changing. When water is always available, the plant assumes safety and continues vegetative growth. But when moisture slowly decreases, the plant interprets that as a signal that environmental conditions may be shifting, resources might become limited, and survival strategy may need to change. And in response, it begins redirecting internal energy away from leaf expansion and toward reproductive preparation. And inside the plant, a complex hormonal shift begins. Ethylene activity rises, gibberellins, which are directly linked to flowering processes, start increasing, and internal growth regulators adjust to prepare the plant for reproduction. It is as if the tree is quietly loading the system, building pressure, waiting for the right environmental signal to release a flowering response. And then comes the most important trigger, a deep rewatering after a controlled dry period. Because when the plant suddenly receives abundant water after mild stress, it interprets the shift as a powerful environmental signal. The roots rapidly absorb moisture, nutrient flow increases dramatically, and the accumulated hormonal pressure is released in a synchronized biological reaction that produces a strong flowering response, often within 5 to 7 days. And this is not guesswork, it is plant physiology that can be observed in many citrus species, especially in wild environments, where rainfall is irregular. Because in nature, lemon and citrus trees often experience cycles of dryness followed by sudden rain. And those exact cycles are what trigger heavy flowering events, which is why sometimes trees growing in rough rocky soil or neglected roadside conditions can produce more fruit than carefully maintained garden trees, because they are naturally experiencing the stress cycles that signal reproduction. And what you are doing with the water stress method is not forcing anything unnatural, but instead replicating and controlling that natural environmental rhythm, giving you the ability to time it precisely for maximum flowering impact. And the key is understanding timing, because this technique works best just before the tree's natural flowering window, typically in late winter to early spring depending on climate. And the goal is to align controlled stress with the period when the tree is already biologically preparing to reproduce. So instead of fighting nature, you are amplifying it, and the process begins with a deliberate reduction in watering over a period of about 10 to 12 days, not stopping water completely, but significantly reducing frequency so the soil gradually becomes drier than usual, allowing the plant to feel a controlled level of water limitation. And during this phase you may notice subtle changes. The leaves might lose a bit of their firm, upright posture, the soil surface will feel drier, and the overall appearance of the tree may soften slightly, and this is exactly the response you want because it indicates the plant has registered environmental change without being pushed into actual damage. And this is where many gardeners make mistakes because they panic and overwater at the first sign of slight drooping. But what looks like distress is actually biological activation. The plant is not dying. It is shifting its internal chemistry toward reproduction. And once this controlled stress period of 10 to 12 days is complete, the second phase begins, which is a single deep and thorough watering that saturates the entire root zone. And this is not a light watering. It is a full reset signal. Water slowly, deeply, and completely so that moisture reaches every part of the root system, until it drains freely in container plants or fully saturates the surrounding soil and ground plants. And this sudden transition from dryness to abundance is what triggers the strongest hormonal response, because the plant reads it as a major environmental shift, and within days the internal reproductive system activates fully, and soon after you begin to see flower buds forming, often within 1 week and typically within 2 weeks across multiple branches at once, creating a synchronized flowering flush rather than scattered blooms, which is important because synchronized flowering improves pollination efficiency dramatically, leading to higher fruit set and better overall harvest. And at this point it becomes clear that fertilizer alone could never achieve this effect, because fertilizer feeds growth but does not create urgency. It makes the plant bigger, greener, and more comfortable. But comfort is the opposite of reproduction in plant biology. So even the best fertilizer cannot switch a plant from vegetative mode to flowering mode without the correct environmental signals, which is why the water stress method is so powerful, because it does not add anything, it simply communicates timing and pressure in the plant's own biological language, and once flowering begins, the process must immediately shift back to stable care, because consistent watering and support are essential for turning flowers into actual fruit, and this balance is important. Stress triggers the flowers, but stability grows the fruit, and there are also important precautions that must be followed, because this method should only be used on mature, well-established lemon trees that have already developed strong root systems, ideally trees that have been in the same location for at least 1 or 2 full growing seasons, because young or recently transplanted trees are still developing and cannot safely handle controlled stress, and applying this method too early can weaken growth or cause long-term damage, and during the stress phase you must carefully monitor the plant, because slight leaf drooping is acceptable and expected, but severe curling, yellowing, or leaf drop is a sign that stress has gone too far, and the process must be stopped immediately with deep watering. And once flowering begins, the stress phase must never be repeated in the same cycle, because the plant now needs stable conditions to support fruit development, and repeating stress too often can weaken long-term health. And to improve results even further, simple supporting practices can be added, such as light pruning before starting the stress phase to remove weak or overcrowded branches so energy is focused on productive growth. Ensuring the tree receives at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight daily, because sunlight directly drives photosynthesis and energy production needed for flowering and fruiting. Applying mulch after deep watering to stabilize soil moisture and improve root conditions. And even assisting pollination manually in low insect environments by gently transferring pollen between flowers to increase fruit set. And when all of these steps are combined correctly, the result is often a dramatic transformation in flowering intensity and fruit production. And what you are really learning here is a deeper principle of nature, that growth is not always about adding more. Sometimes it is about creating the right conditions for a biological decision to switch modes, because plants evolved in unpredictable environments, not in perfectly controlled gardens, and their survival strategy depends on responding to change, not constant comfort. And by reintroducing controlled variation through water timing, you are simply reconnecting the plant to its natural programming. And once you see the results for yourself, a tree that was once only producing leaves can suddenly become heavily loaded with blossoms and fruit. And that is when you realize the tree was never broken, it was simply waiting for the right signal. And now you know how to give it that signal at the right time in the right way, so try it carefully, observe the changes, and when your lemon tree finally bursts into bloom, you will understand its true potential in a completely new way.